So this is my second video for today. If you missed it, there's also a video that I've just released, which is having a look at some more motions that have been filed by Stearns' lawyer. Because apparently she's not going to be happy until she reaches 100. I'd be interested to know your predictions on how long it takes her to reach the 100 mark in terms of motions for his DP case. Currently the number stands at 68, which is pretty impressive. So she needs another 32, or if we allow, I believe there is one motion to continue. So if we count that as 69, if we don't count that, it's 68. So she needs another 32 to break the 100 mark. Do you think she'll get there? If so, are you predicting? What are you predicting? My prediction is that she will achieve that at this rate by the end of April. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe she's got enough there now and doesn't need to do any more, but it just seems to be never ending. Now, moving on to today's video. Yesterday I released a video from a friend of Stearns who, his mother was friends with Stearns' mother. They owned the property where Stearns' mother kept her horse, and as children, him and Stearns spent a lot of time hanging out together. That was a really fascinating video, so if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it, and I will provide the link for that in the description for this video. In this video, I wanted to have a look at his friend Chase. We've heard Deb and Chris mention Chase, and we've heard it mentioned on several channels of this friend Chase. Chase was apparently Stearns' best friend at one point in time, and this particular interview is from him calling into Gray Hughes. Now, if you are not familiar with Gray Hughes Investigates, when he's covering a case, he will quite often open phone lines for people to call in and have conversations about cases, which often results in people connected to the case ringing in, people wanting to just get things off their chest. And you see this with cases where people are connected to the cases and they just want to speak out, they want to get stuff off their chest. Sometimes you get people who are just pure narcissists and just want to be acknowledged just for the sake of infamy. Sometimes you also get people who just are absolutely not connected to the case at all, and they just want to speak out and get attention and try and convince people that they are connected. I can't understand that mindset whatsoever. Now, as mentioned in yesterday's video, there's always a need for caution when we have a look at these interviews with people who are supposedly connected with someone in the case, because you have to first of all question their motivation. You have to question who they are as a person. So you don't know this person really. You don't know whether they are likely to over-exaggerate things, whether they have an ulterior motive for making the phone call. There are so many reasons that people will say things in particular. And of course, we all know that everything we see in the world is subjective. I could tell you about something that I experienced yesterday, and if I was with someone else, they could tell you the same thing, and we may relate completely different experiences, or what sound like completely different experiences, based on our own perception. So, and of course, there's the memory factor. Some of the things that this guy is talking about are events that occurred some time ago. So obviously that is going to have an impact on how easily he recalls the things that he's talking about. Is he a reliable witness? I'll let you decide. Let's jump in and have a listen to what this guy had to say.
I was that kid's best friend for like a decade. Yeah, so we had a falling out like 12 years ago, but he still floats in the same circles because he moved up and down the state apparently, like doing real estate with his mom and dad. But he started working for Disney, and I know he's still working there in like September, but I don't think he's working there anymore because Disney made a statement or something about it. He was actually in the T-Rex area at Epcot, I think. I think that's where he worked. I don't know if like he's not working. I mean, he could have quit after September, but I know in September he's still working there.
So, to hear from someone who was best friends with this guy for 10 years is definitely going to be interesting. He says he hasn't spoken to him for 12 years, which puts them around the 25 mark, or at least Stearns around the 25 mark when this guy last spoke to him. So that would say that he knew Stearns from when they were about 15 through to about 25. What he's saying about Disney fits because we've heard from Chris Stearns that basically he had Stephan quit his job at Disney in the December and moved back to Northport because he believed that Stephan wasn't earning enough with his Disney job. So yes, he probably would have still been working at Disney in September of 2023.
Because he had pictures on his Instagram. Because people always send me crap about him because we were best friends for so long, and then we had a falling out because he drew a gun on me over a disagreement. So I just cut ties with him completely.
I have to say, from what we are hearing, it honestly sounds quite remarkable that this guy made it to 37 without either unaliving someone or himself ending up unalived. We're now hearing his friend talking about him pulling a gun on him. And I could imagine, based on what I'm now hearing about Stearns and the way his brain works, that if the story that we heard from his friend in yesterday's video about Stephan being caught basically filming this guy's mother in the bathroom and his father pulled a gun on him, that would then be added to Stearns' own personal repertoire of moves, essentially. We know he's got a history of pulling his knife on people, and that he actually pulled a knife on that guy in California, I believe it was. So it's definitely interesting to hear that he pulled a gun on his best friend.
But some of the stuff that kid did growing up was so crazy. So a year after we stopped being friends, one of our mutual friends was going through hard times and needed a cheap place to live. So he moved in with him. And this kid's like an IT wizard. So essentially what happened is a year after that, they had a falling out. And I convinced my buddy to tell me what happened. And apparently what had happened was he had been cleaning up the network and found a shared folder between their computers where Stephan had been secretly hiding a camera in his room and recording his girlfriend coming in and out of the shower.
Oh, jeez.
And from what I understand, there was kid stuff on there as well. And like I said, my buddy was going through a really hard time, like literally broke. And from what I understand, Stephan's mom paid off my buddy to not talk about it.
Okay, that statement definitely requires a lot of unwrapping. Now, obviously, we don't know if this is truthful. This could be an over-exaggeration of something, or it could also be, based on the timing of it, it could be a story that's been created to fit in around the CSAM stuff. Because we know at this point in time that the information would have been out there about him being charged on CSAM charges with over 60 images. The information about filming the flatmate would not have been out there at that point in time. But we know that there was already information out there about his activities. Why am I saying we need to question it? Because we always do with things like this, because there is always a temptation to over-exaggerate when you are getting attention for a story. So, first of all, he mentions his friend having moved in with Stephan because he was hard up on cash, needed somewhere to stay, and them having a shared network folder. Now, I can tell you straight up that it is a classic nerd move to create hidden folders. And I think that's what he's talking about here. So clearly if they had a shared network where they were living, then what has occurred is that it sounds like Stephan has created a hidden folder, and he's hidden it in the network, not under his own files, but as probably a combined house file, thinking that no one would spot it, probably not realising that this guy was pretty savvy. Trust me, I've seen it. Okay, if you talk to anyone who works in IT in education, they will tell you about the constant struggle with secondary kids who are hiding folders which contain links to get them into closed websites that are actually blocked within the school, that they shouldn't actually be able to access. But you get some really savvy kids who create a special link that will get them into those websites regardless, and they hide that link in folders. They might, one example of that is hiding a link in a folder belonging to a much younger student who they knew that particular grade, those kids didn't access their own folders. So hence these kids believed that no one would actually discover the link was hidden in there because no one would ever go into that folder and see. Of course, unfortunately for those boys, there was a tattletale who basically shared the goss. But yes, people who do the wrong thing with IT will find all manner of ways of hiding what they are doing. So I do find that believable. Why would he not put it in his own folders? Well, that's obvious, isn't it? Sounds like he was quite devious even from then, even from an early time. So that's going back 12 years or so. Now, let's talk about the secret camera. Well, if that is the truth, there's precedent for what happened with Jen's flatmate, isn't there? Straight up, it's believable. This is now the second time we've heard one of his friends talking about him filming people. So we had the friend talk yesterday talking about him filming his mother while she was in the bathroom. Seems to be a thing for Stephan to film people while they're in the bathroom. Now he's set up a camera for the friend's girlfriend, also to catch her in the bathroom. Which goes back to the question, the day that Maddie went missing, Jen's flatmate was aware that Stephan was doing something with tools in the kitchen area. And part of that included power tools. Did he have a hidden camera somewhere? Was he destroying a hard drive or USBs? Was he destroying a camera? And if so, where did it end up? It does bother me trying to figure out what he was doing that particular day. Now, the other thing that this guy mentions is that Deb paid off the friend, paid him to keep quiet. Well, you know what? I could see that happening. I honestly could. I think of the parents, she had a somewhat interesting relationship with Stephan. I think that it was both emotionally abusive and also extremely protective. And I think that she switched between the two. So I think there was probably quite a lot of emotional abuse. But then I think she compensated for the emotional abuse by basically giving him anything he wanted and covering for him when he did things wrong. And I'm basing that on the interviews with her and also from what these two friends have both said. Bear in mind, though, that if Chase is saying that he was friends with Stephan for 10 years, that means that he was friends with Stephan from when he was about 15. If he was Stephan's best friend, then he probably also intersected with the other friend that we heard from yesterday. And he's talking about a network of people who communicate on Instagram. What is the relationship between these two guys that have rang Gray Hughes? Because that's the other side of things. You may get one person giving a story and another person wanting to kind of up that story. I believe what he's saying, though, but I also feel there is a level of enthusiasm in his voice here. Like he is almost excited to be telling these stories. And when I hear that in someone's voice, it does make me want to be just a little bit more cautious in terms of how much I believe from them. Are they over exaggerating? Are they adding extra details just because it gives them that extra bit of attention? They're doing it for the reaction. He mentions that he had lived with Stephan. Was this a foster relationship? There's a lot of questions I have here. And I'm not trying to discount him. I'm just trying to be super cautious because there's just something here that tells me I need to be a little bit cautious of the stories that this guy is telling. I can't explain to you what it is other than the eagerness in his voice, and maybe it just be that. Anyway, let's keep going and see what else he's got to say.
And so he was cleaning up the network and found images that this Stephan guy's kind of a moron, isn't he? I mean, he does.
It's something like all of us are friends. So like a lot of us old friends from high school, they've all been blowing me up for like the last 2 days about all this. And that's kind of the agreement we've all come to, too. We're like, wow, he was actually really, really dumb. Like, all of this is so stupid. Like, it's kind of crazy because he was kind of a smart kid, but he had social issues a little bit. But, I mean, he partied. I threw parties all the time, and he always came out and partied. I mean, me and him were basically attached at the hip. We lived together. We lived in the same room for, like, 5 years.
Geez, imagine sharing a room with that guy for 5 years. Just the thought, it's so disgusting. Now, I find it amusing that they're saying, look, he's a smart guy, but he's kind of dumb. I think what we're seeing is an arrogance. He has had a lifetime of getting away with things, a lifetime of having his parents cover for him when he's done something wrong. So I don't know about it being kind of dumb. I think it's just more about thinking that he doesn't need to be overly careful when he's doing the wrong thing because he expects his parents are going to get him out of it. Now, when he says that him and Stephan were both kind of into the party scene, I get Paul Flores vibes. We know that Stearns liked drugs. We know the sort of things that he was looking up online in relation to that. And I just wonder if the reason why his friends believed that Stephan was attracting all these females is maybe drug related. And I really hope none of those females were going home with him after a party and that things weren't happening that they were unaware of. I know that's a big... Well, yes and no, it's a big leap. Like I said, I have Paul Flores vibes. If you're not familiar with Paul Flores, Kristen Smart case, she went missing in, I believe it was about 1996. He was finally convicted for her death in, I think, 2022. And at the time that he was arrested, it came out that he had been using date drugs quite often, and there were a number of women who came forward about that. And I can't help wondering if sometime in the past that was something for Stephan, or if, thankfully, something that he didn't actually have access to because he was so socially inept. But then Paul Flores was also socially inept. He was the weird guy on campus. Definitely a few similarities there.
That's why all this is so crazy to see all this going down, and just like the amount of people that are flooding me constantly about it. But his mom was, I mean, his dad is pretty normal. It always seemed like his dad didn't like the rest of the family. And his brother seemed to distance himself from the... I mean, I knew this kid. We were attached at the hip for a better part of a decade, and I never once saw his brother.
Now, it was interesting that in yesterday's video, the friend mentioned that he believed that the older brother was actually a stepbrother. He was Deb's son, but not Chris's son, which I find kind of fascinating. I'm not sure if that is true, though, because I had also heard that he had changed the spelling of Stearns in his last name to basically separate himself from the family. So I'm not sure if he is a full brother or stepbrother. It sounds like the general consensus is that Deb isn't the nicest person. And to be honest, that's the vibes that I've got from watching various interviews. And it also makes you wonder. You have Deb and Chris basically saying that they are sleep divorced. They sleep in separate bedrooms. You have Chris, who made a career out of being a travelling salesman, essentially being away from the home most of the time. You have those divorce papers where it sounds like he had another relationship, which was a close relationship with another woman that had begun around the same time that they were married and that they were celebrating anniversaries. And it makes you wonder if perhaps when you look at their age, some people in those kinds of marriages feel like they can't divorce. And they end up with another significant partner who is someone who becomes their best friend, and they sneak around in the background. I'm not saying it's right, but it happens. It can happen quite often. when there is someone in the relationship who is perhaps emotionally abusive. And I could imagine, given that the way she treated Stephan, that she could also potentially have been not so nice with Chris also. That's all speculation, of course, but it's just interesting that you have this guy who was close with the family for 10 years who is saying the same thing as the other guy, that Chris seemed like a fairly normal bloke. Deb seemed a little bit off kilter. Now, that said, I will say that to me, Chris sounds like someone who loves to talk himself up a bit. He likes to over-exaggerate stories. And he likes to, well, not necessarily name drop, but that whole thing, what was that whole thing with him about making such an issue about having also been a police officer? There's some sort of motivation there. I think this makes me question. I do believe that he was helping Stephan before Stephan was arrested. But it also makes me question a lot with regards to Deb, as to how honest some of the things she said have been.
I think his brother was military or something like that.
Well, what can you tell us about, like, so how long do you know this guy for?
I moved here from Japan when I was like 17, so probably until I was 27. We lived together for probably 6-7 of those years.
Wow. So, like, what can you tell? Like, you know, remembering back, what do you know about him? I mean,
so this guy is either a few years older than Stephan, or he's got his dates out of kilter a little bit. Because he's saying that he hadn't seen Stephan in 12 years. At this point in time, Stephan was 37. And if he's saying that he last saw Stephan when he was 27, that would make him 39. I think. So it sounds like he is a little bit older than Stephan. But then at the same time, he's talking about friends from high school. So I'm just wondering if he's just getting his timeline out of kilter a little bit.
Just, how was he like when you go to bars and the girls and whatever, you know?
Yeah, all that was like, I mean, there's one time recently, and that's because she actually messaged me today. She's married with kids now and everything like that, but there was one girl who messaged me, and we didn't let him bring her to parties. I mean, he had to be 20, probably 20 at the time, and he was dating a girl who was 17. And we were like, no, sorry, she's not allowed. So none of us really interacted with her, so I don't really know too much about that, but we do know he was dating a young girl.
And what did she look like?
None of us.
Was she really
She was
young?
Asian.
Oh, she was Asian and really small then?
Yeah, she was tiny and Asian, yeah.
Okay.
She was literally tiny and Asian. I mean, 4'11" maybe.
Well, my wife's only, she's a really small. She's only like 4'5"
Yeah.
or
and this
7
girl was
or
too. She was super tiny. And, I mean, so we thought that was a little weird, but this girl had messaged me earlier today, and she made a comment about that same thing that I'm saying now. And we were all told she was 17. She told me today on Instagram that she was 14 at the time.
Now, if that story is true, then Stephan lied to his closest friends even about the age of his girlfriend. That shows you that he knew that what he was doing was wrong. 17 to 20, legally, it's still not ideal. In Australia, that would be still labelled statutory R if she was under 18. But only being a 3-year difference, yeah, okay, you hear of that with relationships. I mean, I believe my mum would have been 19 when my parents married, and Dad was 4 years older than her. I mean, that's only a few years older than a 17-year-old. And I know that's going back a very, very long time. 17 doesn't sound nearly as bad as 14. When you hear of a 20-year-old going out with a 14-year-old, well, then he should have been arrested. And clearly he was taking advantage of her, because at 14, it would have been exciting for her. Her brain would have still been developing. She would have lacked the maturity to recognise that this guy was taking advantage of her. So if that is indeed true, then it is truly disgusting. It would be good if this lady would actually contact one of the creators, one of the YouTube creators who is covering this case, and shared her side of the story, because it would be interesting to hear from one of Stephan's girlfriends from way back then. But then I could imagine too that no one would want to come forward either and be known, because who would want to actually admit to having gone out with that loser?
So that
wow.
dramatically changes all of that.
Oh, wow. So the same girl that he told you was 17 was only 14?
Yeah, because she
Wow.
mentioned that today in the Instagram.
Wow, that's insane. So what was this part about you, a gun up above? I think I missed that. I was trying to take care of some business.
So we were living together. I don't know, probably a couple years into. This was at the end of our relationship. So we had a disagreement because there was a lot of issues wrong with the house. We were renting through his dad, and I didn't want to pay rent because like a whole bunch of these issues, AC, garage, all these things hadn't been fixed, and my car was pinned in the garage. And this went on for like months. So finally I refused to pay rent. I was like, look, you got to fix these issues. I'm like, this can't go on any longer. I'm not paying rent until you fix these issues. And his son flipped out on me because I guess his dad was giving him a hard time trying to get Stephan to give the money to pay the rent. And I was just like, no, not until you fix these problems. And Stephan flipped out the house, threw a temper tantrum. And I mean a legit like 3-year-old temper tantrum, laying on the ground, a grown man pounding and kicking his feet into the ground and screaming and yelling. And he does all this, proceeds to run into the room, grab his gun, and draw a gun on me.
Wow.
We get into a scuffle after that. I leave. I never come back. My dad gives me money because I'm broke. I'm broke, 20-year-old at the time, like bouncing between jobs. And he gives me the money to break the lease because I told him what happened.
Okay, we did have confirmation from Deb and Chris that Chase was a friend of Stephan's. But I'm having issues with what he's saying here for a few reasons. First of all, he has said basically this 14-year-old girl that Stephan was going out with, they didn't allow him to have her come to parties and everything. Sounds like she was on the peripheral, didn't really have much to do with Stephan's friends. And I'm guessing he did that by choice because of the age. And now he's saying that she contacted him on Instagram and said, oh, by the way, I was 14 at the time. Maybe. But I have questions about that. Now, in terms of this story about pulling a gun on him, first of all, okay, can I see Stephan lying on the floor and chucking a tantrum? Yeah, probably. I would probably see him also sitting in a corner and sulking. If there was pressure on him from his father to get rent money, I would imagine the pressure may have even come from his mother. I think he would have been more afraid of his mother. But I could imagine his father putting pressure on him to get the rent money. Now, let's be real. This guy was doing the wrong thing by withholding rent money if you have a contract, then there are legal ways about going about it. So, they could have put him out on his arse on the street. So I guess he is lucky in that regard. But that's not the thing that's at issue here, so I'm not going to go into that. What he has said, on one hand, is that this instance was the end of their friendship, and that the last time they were friends was when he was 27. But then he contradicts himself. He says something like a few years into when we were living together, and then changes that to, well, just before the friendship ended. And then he says, I was a broke 20-year-old. And that his dad helped him get out of the lease because he was a broke 20-year-old. I don't know what's going on here. But when someone's story is all over the place like that, it makes me question just how accurate the story is. Is there an over-exaggeration here because he has an audience? Is this perhaps an incident that has occurred, but he is talking it up for the audience? I could see Stephan pulling a gun on someone, but I'm just a little bit concerned by the inconsistencies here.
He's like, you need to get out of there. So he gives me the money, break the lease with everything, and I left. So that was the last I talked to the kid personally.
Wow.
But then a year after that, our mutual buddy moved in, and that's when all the camera stuff and all that went down.
But like, you moved back in with him somehow again after that? Or even
No. After the gut thing, I never talked to the kid again.
Okay.
We just float in the same circle. So, like, every time he hangs out with someone I know or messages someone I know, I get all these messages on Facebook or Instagram from, whoever it is.
And so how long ago was this server moment where he was at work and...
Oh, this wasn't at work. This was at the house. My buddy was just, like, going through... So he's, like... He's a rare breed. He loves IT networking. Like, he's not good at IT networking. He loves IT networking. Like, he loves going through networks and cleaning things and making things move faster and 3D printing. He's just one of those guys. Mm-hmm. And so he was still going through school and everything, so he was playing around on the network at the house and going through it. And that's where he found a shared folder between Stephan's computer and his computer on the network. And he thought that was just weird that there was even a folder there. So that's when he went into it, and that's where he saw a whole bunch of young kid stuff and
why did he put it in
videos and pictures
place?
of his girlfriend.
I mean, it's sort of weird.
Because Stephan's an idiot.
I mean, a shared folder on the network.
Yeah, it was literally like connected. It was in the middle of the network, like a portioned off section that Lance had for like when we want to bounce files back and to and fro in the house.
So yeah, it definitely sounds like if that is indeed the case, that the file was hidden in a hidden location on the server, somewhere where you probably needed to go through a few different files to get to that particular file, something that wouldn't readily appear on the screen of the computer. And I could imagine Stephan doing something like that.
It was just like that, something quick and easy. We were all wired together because we're all gamers.
So he had like CSAM material and his girlfriend on there, or child pornography and his girlfriend,
and my buddy, the IT guy's girlfriend, from a hidden camera in their bedroom.
Wow.
Yeah, because he also lived in the house. I don't know if I stated that earlier, but even when I lived there, like, we lived together. Because his dad owned the place, so it was like super cheap rent, and Windermere's an expensive town.
Again, maybe I missed it, but I thought he said that this other friend moved in after he moved out, and now he's saying they all lived there together because it was super cheap rent. Something's just not quite adding up with this story. I wonder how much of the story is actually accurate. I am putting less weight on this one than I would on the one that I listened to yesterday.
Well, do you have any other like times when you were hanging out with him that you were just sort of like, God, that's weird, or something like that?
You know,
I don't know if you thought about it.
He was very socially awkward other than that. I mean, I know there was a story that I was told when he first moved here by his own mom, and that was him stabbing a dude when he was like 14 years old. So I doubt anyone even knows. This happened in California before his family even moved over here. But he stabbed, I guess, from what I understood, he was walking down the road. He was like 14 years old in California, and some guy had catcalled his girl, and he flicked the guy off. The guy was like a drunk 40-year-old man who proceeded to run across the road and beat the living tar out of him. Well, apparently Stephan at 14 years old was one of those kids who carries knives on him, and he stabbed him and missed his heart by like barely a millimeter.
Wow.
Okay, now we know that that did actually happen. And what's interesting here is that he's relaying it as it was told to him by Deb. Now, in the Hidden True Crime interview, I believe it was Chris who shared the story. Now, in this version from Deb, he was 14 and accosted by a guy who was drunk and ran across the road and tried to attack him, and then Stephan nearly killed him, just missed his heart. According to Chris's version of it is that Stephan was actually around 17 and that the guy was in a car and he folded himself out of the car, inferring that this was a big guy, much, much bigger than Stephan, and that basically Stephan couldn't defend himself because of the size of the guy, and so Stephan used the knife to defend himself. So there's a slight difference in the story here. I think it fits when you look at the way that they talk about Jen. Because from Deb, a lot of the time you have her placing Jen at the middle of the crime and basically saying Stephan is taking the rap for Jen. Whereas Chris is more willing to accept that Stephan is just a jerk and that was responsible for his own actions. So it doesn't surprise me that there are different versions of this story.
So almost killed him. That was when he was 14, and I know he had a whole bunch of therapy afterwards because apparently the beating kind of messed with his brain or something where he could like fly off the handle really easily. Like he would just get super angry really quick.
Deb and Chris did also mention that Stephan had to have therapy after that incident. As for flying off the handle really quick, I've heard enough stories that make me think that that was a lifelong thing for him. That he always had anger issues. And that he had issues even before he got run over by that car. If he was flying off the handle really quick after the incident with the knife, that would probably be a PTSD thing, because clearly it wasn't a traumatic brain injury thing.
And I only saw a couple flashes of that during our relationship together, but I mean that was like. But I will say, of that entire family, Dad seemed normal. Mom, on the other hand, is a whole different beast altogether. Like, she raises championship poodles. She's the meanest, rudest, loudest, most racist person I've ever, and openly racist. I mean, she doesn't hide it. Just obnoxious person I've ever met in my life.
Wow. No wonder Deb Stearns hates Gray Hughes. That's a pretty full-on thing to say about anyone. I could see that she could have a possibly nasty side to her. You hear that in the way she speaks. You hear that in the negativity that she shows towards Stephan. But just wow.
Like, my sister used to run a Publix down here, and she was hated by the entire staff. Like, how do you
Wow.
get hated by a bagger? Like, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Like, but everyone knew this lady when she walked through the door. She said she was an ex-Air Force drill sergeant, a Special Forces drill sergeant, no less. I don't know. That could be true, could be false, who knows. She was a whole different beast, and, like, he was attached to her by the cord. Like, it was really weird. Their relationship was weird. Dad seemed to hate the rest of the family. Yeah, Dad was, like, never around, really. Dad would pop in, like, on weekends here and there, and he slept in a separate bedroom.
Again, what he's saying does point towards a potentially psychologically abusive relationship between Deb and Stephan. For something like that to work, there has to be the ups and downs. So the buying gifts, going out of her way to cover for him when he gets into trouble. And then on the flip side, just being really emotionally abusive, calling him a loser and taking away his car keys in front of his friends and removing his car plates in front of his friends, all that sort of stuff. So we're definitely getting an interesting picture of Deb here from this friend, and he is possibly closest to the family. So, yeah, very interesting. Can I see that sort of thing in Deb? Yeah, I can. Could he be over-exaggerating? Well, heck yeah. I mean, we're talking about a guy who had interactions with this woman in his teenage years. He probably wasn't an angel. So some of those interactions were probably interactions where he did the wrong thing and she came across him because of it. So we do have to keep that in mind. But it is interesting when he says that the entire staff of a Publix did not like her.
And then he would go back to doing real estate stuff and disappear for weeks on it down south. I mean, that was like all the time.
Probably wanted to get away from his kid.
I know. That's my impression I always had of him was, he doesn't like the wife and he doesn't like the kid.
You would imagine that the number one reason for staying away would have to be that you didn't get along with your spouse. Because at the end of the day, I could imagine Chris Stearns being capable of putting his foot down and saying enough. But if Deb were someone who were to overrule that, then it must have put him in a difficult situation.
He got dealt a bad hand, it sounds like.
Yeah, it seems like. And the other son, I want to keep calling him Brett for some reason, but I can't remember his name because he never came around. But I think he was military and lived in North Carolina, from what I understand. And I think when he had kids, he made an attempt, like sent them pictures of the family on Christmas kind of thing. And that was like the first thing he had done in like 15 years. So I don't know what happened in that family with that side, but I mean, what makes his son disappear from his family for 15 years by choice?
So it sounds kind of like, I mean, this arrest warrant, he has the thing about he has all those photographs on his phone. So it sort of sounds kind of similar.
The interview where he's cracking his knuckles, he used to do that. Like, so, I mean, we were like popular party kids back in high school. At least me and my circle of friends was, and he was a part of that because he was like my friend.
Again, we get the reference to the cracking the knuckles. Does anyone else think that, or did anyone else find it really great on them to hear him refer to Stearns as popular? I can imagine he just would have been the sort of kid that went to parties because his friends did, and everyone probably tried to avoid him at parties because he was just so strange.
And so we got into a lot of fights with other kids and stuff like that, and that was just something he always did when he had this weird thing about like portraying being the most alpha guy in the room. What do they say? All bark, no bite. That was kind of him, and he used to do that all the time. He used to drive us nuts because it pissed everyone off. Where he would sit there and just start cracking his knuckles non-stop.
Well, that says to me that this guy, Stearns, is going to need to be in isolation for the rest of his life, basically. Because after his trial, if they put him out in Gen Pop, he won't last long at all. He will mouth off at somebody, and that'll be it.
And it would be so aggravating. And that was one of the things we were talking about on Instagram today, because we had a pretty tight circle of friends, and we've all gone our separate ways, had kids, and done all that stuff. And we have an Instagram chat with a lot of us in it, and obviously he's never been in it, but a lot of us other ones are in it. And we were just all talking today about a whole bunch of stuff. We remember of him back when we were younger and being like, "Damn, how did we not notice? Like, that's kind of crazy."
Yeah, and what about the part about him? He factory reset his phone. Like we were reading that earlier. It's like, what a dummy.
Okay, the kid's not that dumb. I could tell you that that's a 100% chance. That is a zero possibility chance with the kid. The kid is really smart when it comes to computers. Like I said, at least when it comes to certain things, he's really smart. We're gamers.
Bingo. He's so right about that. And I mean, look at it. This guy was on Reddit. He was on Discord. He was clearly spent his life online. And given that he had those 30,000 plus images that Ellie couldn't identify all the people, he certainly knew his way around the internet. So, of course, he knew what he was doing when he factory reset his phone.
And we grew up gaming before, the internet is the way it is. So we used to go in and go into the codes and change all of our settings and do all that kind of. We were really big.
Did you play Doom though? Hey, I played the original Doom with the.
I played Doom on a floppy disk.
Remember we had to play the phone? You had to put the phone and do the 9600 baud, and then got to 1440, and it was like, whoa, yeah, this is incredible.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That just entirely went over my head. I've got no idea what he was saying just then.
But obviously he factory reset.
For that to happen, he did it. Yeah, there was no way. That's a physical impossibility. The second so we had a thing in the chat where I saw the video where he was sitting behind the mom in the interview. And when I saw that live, at least when it was posted by the news channel. And when I saw that, I literally said, "Oh, he did it." I was like, I can look that kid in the face. So he has tells. He's just a bad liar. Always has been, always will be. Everyone knows and everyone says he's always been he was kind of creepy. All his ex-girlfriends have messaged me the last day or two. And that's a common reoccurring word used to describe him as creepy.
Face it, you didn't even have to know the guy to watch that interview and be saying he did it. I can remember when Maddie was still missing, and even before he was arrested for the CSAM stuff, and already creators were going, him, look at him, he did it. And, well, they were right. And what's the deal with him having had lots of girlfriends when he was young? What was wrong with those girls? And I apologise if any of those ladies are now listening. But I'm just wondering what the appeal was. Was it just the goofy immaturity? I guess some girls are drawn to that sort of thing. Or was he free with handing out his drugs? I just can't understand the mentality of liking someone like him.
So it's just I don't necessarily know exactly the details of what they saw or what kind of things who knows.
Did you see that interview with the mother, and he's in the background there, and then he sort of gets up and walks away at one point?
Yeah, so I don't think it's on camera, but how that started was kind of wild too. The way he grabs the chair and just walks up and slams it down on the floor, and it just kind of plops his feet down one at a time, stomping them into the ground. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Like,
must be weird just for
like,
you in general, right? Like, it's weird, right?
It's definitely weird for all of us.
Yeah.
Like, all of us. Because, I mean, like I said, we were party kids, so we hung out with a lot of people. So there's a lot of people that are just... Girls from all up and down the state have been messaging me being like, I'm in tears, this is crazy, I'm throwing up. And I'm just like, that's, I don't even know really what to say about that. I'm just kind of like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
I come from a military family, so I've been around some crazy, I've been around death and things that happen plenty of times.
I don't think they're really throwing up. They just wanted to make you impressed that they were so emotionally affected.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to say I really hate Gray's attitude towards women. Just saying, oh, well, I don't think they were really throwing up. They were just trying to make it sound like they were so emotionally affected. Well, sometimes when something is such a shock to you and such an emotional shock, then, yeah, you may find yourself throwing up. As a female, when you think about the things he did, if I had found out that sort of thing about one of my ex-boyfriends, heck, I don't know how I would react, and I think it could be a full-on reaction. So it makes me angry for someone to minimise somebody's reaction to something like this. Particularly women who were unfortunate enough to date this guy. Because I could imagine that would have a major effect on you when you hear what he did.
And I'm just like, that's a lot. I haven't talked to these people in like 15 years. Half these people are messaging me.
It's like a reunion, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy, all of us talking about it and just like the things we remember and kind of being like, maybe we should have thought a little harder about that. Maybe we should have followed up with our buddy when he told me what happened. Maybe I should have followed up because I didn't talk to my buddy for years afterwards either. I was like, take the money and report them. I was like, what are they going to do? But I'm going to assume they didn't report him, obviously. So, but I know his mom paid him off because my buddy was hurting and my buddy got an apartment right after. So,
so you guys
go from having no money to having
that
money.
he worked at...
I really hope that if that guy actually is out there and that occurred, that he makes contact with the state prosecutor's office and shares that story, because that would certainly make for a strong witness to establish that this has been a long-term pattern with Stephan.
Disneyland. So how long was he there? Do you think he was doing anything there with cameras?
If he was at Disney, it was only for a year, as of like September 26th or something like that.
But he obviously worked there for the kids, right? Because there were kids there. I would assume because so when people told me that he had got a job at Disney, I thought that was really weird.
Yes, you could see it as really weird, but he clearly got the job there through Jen. And you hear Jen talking about how her sister used to work there. So it sounds like it's something that Stephanie used to work there, encouraged Jen to get a job there, and then Jen encouraged Stephan to get a job there so he could move in with her. In terms of him being there because of the kids, yeah, that is a scary thought. But at least he would have had limited opportunities to record kids while he was there, because he would have been in a costume and therefore working. But it is definitely disturbing.
To be honest with you, I just thought that was weird in general because, like, his dad does real estate, and he's worked for his dad forever. Like, that's just what he does because he can't do anything else because he's terrible. He wakes up when he feels like it, does whatever work he wants to do. He's just one of those lazy kind of people when it comes to that. Just does whatever he wants.
You're talking about Stephan, but you're talking about him.
And Daddy and Mom, he always bailed him out of every issue he ever had. So, I mean, they moved to the other side of the state to get away from his charges that he had when he was a kid from stabbing that guy. So they moved literally all the way across the state so no one would know him in that town anymore.
I think even just listening to Deb and Chris, we can be pretty certain that they actually did cover his for his ass a lot of the time, and that they did fix things for him when he did do stuff wrong. And in terms of them moving after the stabbing incident, there is an interesting comment that Deb Stearns makes during one of the interviews where she's talking about the moving. She said we had to move. And then there's a bit of a pause, and then she talks about them having to move because her mother had cancer. But there was just something about the way it was said that made me question if that was the real reason that they moved. It may have been in the Hidden True Crime interview. I'd probably have to go back and have a look. Let me know if you picked up on that also, and also let me know if you can remember which interview it was. But it was certainly something that gave me pause for a moment when I heard the way she said it.
You think that's a true story that did you talk to your friend?
I don't know. That was his mom that told me that.
No, so, I'm talking about the other story.
A long time ago.
I'm talking about the other one. The one. Do you think it's a true story that the mom paid off your roommate to not share the stuff?
Yeah, so that kid I actually trust a lot.
Yeah,
me and that kid have been through thick and thin. I mean, like he's
jeez.
Like when someone used to go down with the cops and rat one or the other person out, and that kid just won't rat someone out. He's that kid.
Okay, so it definitely sounds like this guy Chase has a rather colourful background, and yeah, it is possible that he is over-exaggerating some things perhaps, or trying to make things sound a little bit more impressive than what they actually are. But you know what? I think on the whole, I actually believe what he's saying. I just question the accuracy of what he's telling us. Like, is he over-exaggerating the stories? Is he embellishing them a little bit? Or is he on the level?
Well, what's weird about it is the mom, that means she was aware that her son has a propensity.
Oh, the mom's definitely aware because I called her son all sorts of those names and called her out on all of it to her face. So I definitely know she knows for sure.
Oh yeah, when made you call him that to their face? Like when was that?
With all the Lance stuff.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess the IT guy. Yeah.
Oh, after that.
But with all his stuff.
And how many years ago was that?
That was like 12 years ago, probably. 10, 12 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have to give it to him. Gray Hughes is really, really good when it comes to questioning people. He homes in on things and he will go back to things. A lot like what you would hear from a good criminal investigator. So he's homing in here on the timeline, just trying to make sure that he is actually getting the timeline correct and to make sure that the information being given to him isn't changing. So Chase has again said 12 years. So I think when he said earlier about being a poor 20-year-old or something, may have been inferring to someone in their 20s, not a poor 20-year-old, and it just came out the wrong way. I don't know. But I am kind of... Look, what he's saying makes sense to me, and I can believe it. but I'm also cautious for some reason with this guy.
I don't have it marked in the calendar, but it's like 10, 12 years ago.
You didn't write it down? Give me the exact date. I need the time and
Yeah, I'm like, I'm literally judging because I'm like, how long have I been dating this girl? 7 years? Okay, yeah, all right, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm like, it must be like 10 to 12.
Can you think of anything else, just offhand? Anything that people have been saying in your Instagram that you remember them talking about, or?
Not really, other than like he always went for the youngest girl at the party. I mean, which is kind of crazy. I can't really confirm that honestly because I was young and I wasn't really paying attention to those things, so I don't even know.
If that's true, it wouldn't surprise me because just what we know about Stephan. I mean, clearly his interest was in young girls as opposed to actual women, and it seems like he's had perverted interests from a very young age, so it makes someone more of a target when they are younger, so it is believable and also very sickening.
But other people notice.
I believe that. Yeah, other people say that. I mean, that's a running theme in the chat that we have. So, But other than that, I mean, all of us ended up normal. We're just kind of like, but he was the one kid. So all of us, a few of us had different falling outs at different periods in time. A lot of us stopped hanging out with each other. I went my own way with esports and other things like that, and then they went their ways with kids and wives and all sorts of stuff like that. And Stephan was the only one who was never in any of our chats, any of our Facebook conversations. Like, we had a big group of friends, and we all still talk almost on a daily basis, at least with a message or two, nothing big or anything, but we just chat back and forth on Facebook and stuff. And he's the one guy who's never been in any of those with anyone, because it's like when I stopped being friends with him, everyone stopped being friends with him. And not because it's almost like the only reason he was ever around was because me and him were so close that he was always with me. So.
Yep. I would be more than willing to bet that the only reason these other friends ever tolerated Stephan was because he was friends with this guy. And that once he was no longer friends with this guy, it gave them an excuse to just ignore him. Because from everything we're hearing, he was always a bit of a freak.
Other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's a lot. The kid was kind of a whack job growing up.
Did you ever go on, like, just you and him go do stuff together?
Oh, yeah, we did stuff all the way. I mean, I got pictures on my Facebook of me and him shooting bows and arrows and everything. We partied all the time, and we smoked a lot of weed. Like, we did all sorts of stuff. We went hiking. Like, we were basically like brothers. We lived together. I mean, we drove the same car. We lived together. We worked both under his dad for like a year or two together. Like, we did all sorts of stuff together. I mean, I helped them raise their newest line of poodles and all that. I lived with him in 1, 2, 3, 4 different homes over the years.
So he's definitely saying there, isn't he, that he lived with the actual Stearns family, like with Deb and Chris and Stephan, which to me says that he perhaps came from a broken family life, or he had issues with his own parents or something. It is really, really interesting. I would love to know a bit more about this guy's history, just to try and figure out where I can put him in my mind as a witness in terms of credibility.
Did you ever, but after the time where he pulled out the gun, you never lived with him again after that, or?
No, I never even talked to him after that. I deleted him from everything I owned at that point in time and never talked to that kid again. I was at the point in my life where I was kind of like, at that point I was already done with the partying and stuff. I mean, I was like 24, 25 years old. I was kind of already done with the partying scene. Wasn't going downtown anymore. Wasn't getting into trouble anymore. I was kind of a troublemaker growing up, so I was kind of done getting in trouble and changed my life around. I was working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And So when the gun was drawn on me, I've had guns drawn on me before, and that was kind of the time where I was like, you know what? I feel like this is always my fault for being in the wrong situation.
Okay, based on what he's saying there, I think that the problem with his timeline is that he has over-exaggerated how long he was friends with Stephan. So if he was the same age as Stephan, if they were at high school together, which is what he has claimed, if they were hanging together and partying together, then, and he's saying that it's been about 12 years, and he's also saying that he was around 24 when he stopped being friends with Stephan, which would fit with the 12-year thing, roughly, if he was the same age as Stephan. So I think what's happened is that he has over-exaggerated, saying that he was friends with Stephan for 10 years and it wasn't really quite that long. It's just kind of rounded up a little bit. I think that's what's going on here, because the rest does seem to match.
And that's why I moved out. I was like, yeah, I just don't need to be around this.
Probably.
And for the last 12 years or so, it's been pretty accurate. No guns.
Well, there you go. Probably a smart move. Probably a smart move.
It's just like, you know, and it's one of those moments where I could definitely tell you it's been long enough now that I can be like, I should have listened to my mom. She didn't like him. She never liked him.
Again, another mother or older woman who did not like Stearns. It really is telling when you start hearing all these comments about Jen's family didn't like Stearns, this guy's mother didn't like Stearns. You have the Sylvia who was interviewed saying that she didn't like him and Courtney didn't like him. Seems like the only females that liked him were the younger females that he dated. And it makes you wonder what he was doing to make them like him.
Like,
yeah, moms.
I should have just listened to my mom.
They have that instinct somehow.
Yeah, it's one of those weird moments where I've heard that line so many times in my life.
Although it sounds like his mom wouldn't have had that instinct.
No, his mom was she was like, it's so hard to describe her because of how vile of a woman that lady is.
Saying that Deb didn't have that instinct is kind of wrong when you consider that what we're hearing here makes it sound like Deb was fully aware of precisely what kind of person her son was. So she had that instinct. She knew he was a monster. And she enabled him and cleaned up after him.
And this is coming from, I have a person in my family who's extremely racist that I dislike very much so. And even that lady is nowhere near the levels of depravity his mom is. Like, she's just a cruel, evil, mean person. And I've just never seen someone who's inherently like that. Like, that's crazy to me. I've seen people who have beliefs and do bad things because of those beliefs, but I've never seen someone who's just like, oh, you're literally just evil. You're just a bad person. And that's her. It's just weird. She's mean to be mean.
Wow. He really does not like Deb Stearns. Now, like I said, I'm not going to comment on that because obviously the relationship between him and Deb Stearns occurred when he was going out of teenage years into young adulthood, and that can be a somewhat obnoxious time. So we don't know if they were clashing for whatever reasons. If he was living with them, it's possible that, and it sounds like him and Stephan were both getting on the weed quite a bit, it's possible that she was just frustrated with them and may have been on their asses all the time because they were wasting time just smoking weed and being losers. So we don't know what the history is there. But at the same time, there are certainly things that I've seen with Deb Stearns that make me question how nice a person she truly is. Now that brings us to the end of that interview. It's been another slightly lengthy video, but I thought this one was another worthwhile one to listen to. Like I said, there's something here. I don't know if it's an over-exaggeration, if he's just someone who likes to spin a yarn and therefore adds embellishments to his story, or whether he's just on the level and it just comes across that way. I believe everything that he's saying. I just question whether there is embellishments in these stories. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think, what your observations are. We know that he was definitely connected with the family. We know that he was definitely Stephan's friend. We've heard that confirmed by Deb and Chris. There's a lot of things there that I find extremely believable. I will say that. And there's a lot of things that make a lot of sense. But other than that, I'm going to leave it for you guys to let me know what you think. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Help me build up my numbers, grow my channel a little bit more. Also, please hit the like button because YouTube loves that. That gets my videos out into the algorithm. And leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on what has been said by this guy, and how credible do you find him as a witness? Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Times